Morning. My name is Dr. Steve Stride, and I am your personal psychologist. And I'm going to be starting up a show called The Surf Shack. And basically, I'm going to be covering 7 pillars for surfing the waves of life. And this is my life's work. I have poured out myself into the psychology field for the past 29 years. And as well, I was a professor for 19 years. And so with all of that experience that I've had, I'm at the point where I want to share. But really when we break down the goal of this podcast is to really provide a place for people to share their stories. And I will start with my own because there's a story that has led me to this place. And as I have migrated within the field of psychology, I have found various things that have been fruitful. And I'm simply to a point now where I have to share. I have to open up about what is in my heart and what I've been experiencing. It's kind of like, I've never given birth before, but it's kind of like something has been building up inside of me, and now it's time to enter the world. And just like the joy of a newborn baby and the happiness that we feel when that occurs, I have a lot of joy in my heart that I want to share. And I want this to be a place where people from all walks of life, culture, religious backgrounds, different points of view, can come and share their story about overcoming, about accomplishing things in their life. And that doesn't mean that we have to have some great accomplishment, to come on the show. It's about the journey. It's about where we are and the challenges that we face. And in a world where there can be lots of negativity that is going around, it is so important for us to be able to have hope, to have a glimmer of light. And the things that I'm hoping to share, I hope they are powerful in the lives of people. And I know that there are many more powerful stories that are out there of people who have overcome, extraordinary things to get where they are in life. And any step of the journey is welcome, and all people are welcome. And so what I've discovered, I've been working on a book that will come out in within the year, called The Surf Shack. And the 7 pillars to surfing the waves of life. Now, waves are a metaphor, and like as a surfer, it's important to go with the wave, to not fight it, because if we do, we're going to end up wiping out. And so in our lives, there are things that we face, challenges that come our way, and we all have to learn how to navigate those things in a way that's effective and fruitful. And that is really the heart of of the message that I'm hoping to bring is to be able to talk about and point out very practical things that help us to build our own wave. And what I mean by that is to build our own wave of positivity. You know, doing little things like making sure we're getting a good night's sleep. You know, eating well. You know, we're going to talk about things like that. You know, we're going to talk about the importance of exercise and and another feature which is often neglected, you know, in the therapeutic world is things like fine arts. You know, it's important that we not only overcome the things that are dragging us down, that are pulling us down, but that we lean into things that foster creativity and growth in our lives. You know, I don't know about you, but my goal is to not just survive this life. I want to thrive. I want to prosper. You know, I want to figure out, you know, why I'm here and, you know, what I should be doing while I'm here, you know, and living passionately and living fully and giving, you know, my best every day. And so we're going to be looking at things that really help us to build our own waves in this life, you know. So instead of being the victim of things that have come our way, which absolutely shape us, that we are going to start harnessing our own power and influencing for good. You know, I guess in a nutshell, that's really the hope of this podcast, is to create waves of people that have stories to tell, to inspire, to lift up, to give hope, you know, in a world that sometimes can be so burdensome. I'll share with you, I've had struggles, and I will get into the details as we move along. But one of the effective things, like this year has been an amazing year. A lot of losses and struggle. You know, I lost a job and have had to rebound and figure things out. And that loss, that suffering, has forced me to think about things in a new light. And so, in other words, out of adversity, out of struggle, something good emerges. It's so important for us to learn those lessons. And this has been an amazing year of growth and learning lessons. And I wouldn't, to be honest, I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I have very real things, you know, real challenges that are on my plate. But you know what? I've learned a lot of things because of that. And I think that's kind of the message that I'm hoping can be developed. That as we struggle, that as we face challenges in our life, that we go with it. We go with the wave, not fight it. You know, let it push us forward and look with curiosity at the thing that we're struggling with. You know, so that we can learn, you know, when you're curious about something in your life, you can learn from it. But when you shut the door and don't want to learn, then the lesson that is there for you is missed. There's an example of that in a poem by Rumi. called The Guest House. Now, kind of using a Disney example, the movie Inside Out is really about embracing what life throws your way. Now, Riley, the main character of the movie, lived in Minnesota, and she was a hockey player. She would, skate on the lake, and she had her friends, she had her teachers, she had her family, she had everything was perfect. And then, like in true Disney form, tragedy, hit. And in this movie, the tragic piece that entered the story was that Riley's dad got a new job in San Francisco. So they had to uproot themselves completely. Everybody was in flux and adjusting. And so Riley's entire world was flipped over. And with that, she started to experience some other emotions that needed to come to the forefront. And if you've seen the movie, there's the main character, Joy. So, like, if we go inside of Riley, there are these emotions, and they're like little characters, and Joy, she's sparkly and bubbly and happy and all of these positive things, and she's kind of the centerpiece of the story at the beginning, and would kind of control things, if you will. And in the world, there's a lot of pressure to be joyful, to be happy. There's social pressure. And so I'd like you to imagine if you were, going back to the poem, you were at your home and Joy came to the door, like literally, the character came to the door. We would smile, we would be happy, we would welcome her in with open arms. Because that's the socially acceptable thing. We think something's wrong with us if we're sad or we're down or we're hurting or suffering, and we want to quickly dismiss it and push it away. So I'd like you to pay attention to your emotional response to joy, because that is kind of the model, that's how we're supposed to be. And if we're not, there's something wrong with us. But in the movie, because of all of the transition that was going on in Riley's life, she needed to feel other feelings, primarily sadness, because of the loss of friendship, the loss of familiarity, everything had changed for her. So basically, I'd like you to imagine that you are in your home, and instead of Joy coming, which is welcomed, come on in, let's have a party, I'd like you to imagine that sadness comes to your door. What would that be like for you? To have sadness visiting you. Most of us, at least myself, would slam the door in sadness's face, because it's like I get a much different response. I'm like, why are you here? So just kind of judging the situation harshly. And I would want to push sadness away. And there's a scene in the movie where that is exactly what happens. So sadness starts to do her job, because that's what Riley is truly experiencing, because of all the grief, all the loss. And there's a scene where Joy draws a circle on the ground and tells sadness to stay in that circle. And oftentimes That is what we do with pain, with hurt, with loss, is we try to put it in a tiny little circle, and we're doing everything we can to avoid it. But what we should do is, like in the poem, invite sadness in. Give sadness a primary spot in the home, a prized spot. Sit before her, you know, and ask, hey, why are you here? What are you trying to teach me? So to open our minds and to be curious. If we're curious, then we're riding the wave. We're just going with what is being presented to us. And if we do that really, really well, it takes work, because believe me, I understand what it's like to suffer and want to push out feelings. But instead of doing that, drawing it closer and then looking at all the nuances of our sadness. And when we do that, we find answers. If we push it away and keep it at a distance, we won't learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn. So a big part of the Surf Shack is drawing things to us and learning and growing from the adversity, from the struggle. So what I will be covering, that's just a nutshell. But on this show, I'm gonna invite people from all walks of life to come on the show and share how they have overcome. Because I believe that is a huge need in our world, in our society. You know, we need to connect with our stories to drive us forward towards growth. So the different facets, the 7 pillars, if you will, the first one, you know, and what I would encourage you to do is to write out, like, what is your top 7? What is your top 7 things, priorities, you know, that you want to live your life by? And realize this, that oftentimes, and this is true for me as well, we have this ideal list of how we want to live our lives. And then we have then we have another list of how we actually live our lives. And if there is disparity between these two lists, that is the foundation for psychological distress. And so we want to marry our ideal with our lived experience. And if we do that, psychological symptoms are reduced. And we're going to get into lots of things that can help to build that wave, that can help to move us forward. Not just survive, but thrive in this life. And this is, I'm going to give you my list, you know, and your list is going to be different. You're going to have different points of view, but you want to list it out in descending order. So the first one for me is faith. You know, my belief system, I believe in a higher power, and so with the faith component, you want to know what you believe. Now, everybody's entitled to believe whatever they want, and that's okay. And so all people are welcome, you know, all beliefs. But what's important is that we align our lives to whatever creed or doctrine or whatever it is that, you know, that you know it, you understand it, and you strive to live it out, walk it out. Number 2 for me is family. Nothing closer to home than family. And so those people that are close to us, that we need to prioritize and protect our families, to work towards. Now, I realize that some of us are in toxic situations, and so I'm not saying stay in a situation like that. There's absolutely, times that you need to put a couple states between you and your family, and I'll argue that family goes beyond genetics. Family is the people that stand by your side, that love you. I'm not saying put up with your nonsense, and just let you do it, but people that really, that live with you, that dream with you, that are in that space. And so it goes beyond, what a nuclear family is. And so, so understand what I'm saying. It's an expansive definition, but it's also, those people that are, if we're married, our spouse, and our children, like pouring your energy into those things, obviously being wise if there's some extenuating circumstances. Another component that we're going to cover is fitness. There is tons of research supporting the importance of an active lifestyle. That we produce great chemicals when we work out or run, and so taking care of our bodies, is an important element that we're going to talk about here. Another one that I mentioned previously is fine arts. It's important that we activate our creative mind. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to play in a band or, lead an orchestra. I mean, to be involved in creative activity of some sort. Now, I forgot to mention this before, but what's important in all of this, there's a concept in psychology called small attainable goals. What that means is when we're setting goals, like say for fitness, start small. If you're going to walk, walk to the corner and back. If you're going to start, working out, you pulling up and parking in the parking lot and looking at the gym, you get a gold star for that, And so when I say small, I mean microscopic, because that's what leads to success. In the psychology field, there's lots of research to support that. So we don't want to overwhelm ourselves. Just start small. And so, so I'll be pointing out like small things that we can do in these areas. And I look forward to hearing about some of your ideas. What ideas do you have? So another component is focus. I've seen this so many times, and it's happened for me as well, is having a goal and walking it out. I'm the first to admit, I've had all kinds of dreams and goals, but I haven't walked it out. I have in some ways. And this theme keeps coming up in therapy over and over and over again. People know the good that they should do, and then they don't do it. And it's like, okay, you're your own worst enemy here. And we all do this. I mean, it just seems like it's a epidemic, And with focus is my favorite word, discipline. And I know it's not a exciting word, but but just that consistency. So, so like going back to exercising, and you're just walking to the corner and back. And so doing that, 5 days a week and take the weekends off, because we want to have balance. We don't want to be too extreme, but you do that, and then after 21 days of being consistent like that, you now have a habit, and there's research to support that. So we want to be small enough to just get the consistency going, and then we add length, time, whatnot. But you just want to get the ball rolling. You want to move it. And so another important aspect is fun. It is really, really important to play. One of my favorite rides at Epcot is, within the ball, and the name is escaping me right now, but there's a question, like you're creating this utopian society, and so do you work to live or live to work? And, so basically it's like, I work, and this is true for me, I work to live. I don't live for work. I have a life. I have a family. I have, friends. And so I go to work and I enjoy it, and it's purpose-filled and fantastic, and, and so I'm, that's why I went to school, because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. But there's far more important things, like the quality, of my marriage, or the quality of my relationship with my kids. That means far more to me than any amount of money or success that I have. So it's important, to do things, that are enjoyable, and to invest in things that really matter. It is important for us to have fun. One of the great things that I love about my family is we love to go to amusement parks and go on roller coasters, and it's just fun. It's just woo. You're going down, you're screaming. You're having a great time with each other, cracking jokes. It is so important for us to have fun and to not take this life so seriously. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty serious about this life and having a purpose and all that kind of stuff. Totally. But we need to be able, we can't be up here all the time. We need to chill. We need to relax. And, this can come out in a simple way, like enjoying a meal. Like, slow down. Just, chew, taste. Like, when we slow down, all of a sudden, you remember when, maybe you don't remember, but back in the day when it was black and white TV. And then when they got color TV, it's like, whoa, this is like awesome, and it was just, and so I want us to live in color. I want to live in color. I want you to live in color, where, and the color is the fun. It's when you're pushing your kid on a swing set, and, you're just in the moment. You're noticing all the expressions on their face. Like our daughter last night, she's doing A Midsummer Night Dream, and she is Puck, and mischievous fairy. And my wife and I were noticing that her facial expressions are just so demonstrative, so wild, and just, she's like totally into it, and she's absorbed, and that is so important for us. We need absorption, whether it's painting or coloring or running. We need to do things that, and this real fun really kind of overlays a lot of this. In other words, do things that you want to do. Don't, don't be committing a whole lot of time to things that you don't want to do, or being around people you don't want to be around. I mean, I understand sometimes we have to do those things, but enjoy life. This life is short, and so it's important to make the most of it. And the last part, which is not sexy, is financial stewardship. So we want to learn how, to be responsible for the gifts that we've been given. There's a song by Benson Boone, and in the song, he's talking about, man, I have this great thing in my life, and, the thought of losing this great thing, there's like a sense of gratitude, appreciation. And I think it's important, financial stewardship is really about appreciating what we have and not taking things for granted, and doing the right thing, if you will. And so, so I am super excited to be able to, to come to you every week. And I look forward to having guests on the show, so that we can build ways together, where we can be a light. Now, all of this stuff that I've been talking about, I'll confess to you. I've wanted to write for a really long time. And a very wise man told me, and I listened, about 10 years ago. I said, hey, I want to write. And he told me, he was aware that I had, kids, young kids. And he says, your children are your book. And I was just like, whoa. I was like, okay, that day will come. Well, the day has come now. But I just love that advice, because it was just like, you know what? They're only young once. And enjoy every moment that is possible. And that's what he meant by that. Don't get distracted by that. Day will come. There's a season for that. And one of the things over the last year, because there's been a lot of adversity, like I said, I will share, I promise, that because of the adversity, I've reshuffled a lot of things. And I've wanted to write for a very long time. And so I did. And so I've been writing. And I've discovered something that is for me, one of the most therapeutic things I could ever have done, is taking my story, where I've been, what I've experienced, highs, lows, all of that, and putting pen to paper, or, tapping on my iPad, writing has just been so satisfying. It's like it's taken my mind to another level that that I wasn't at, and I'm finding that because of the writing and a lot of other things, that I'm processing and working through the challenges that I've faced, and it's gone from, I have this huge pile of pain, to, through writing and other things that I'll mention, that pile has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I can quite frankly say I have less pain, since you know, March 18th, to now, because I've been taking my experiences, taking my deepest thoughts, and putting them together and organizing them. And that has been extremely therapeutic. And just FYI, that's exactly how therapy works. Somebody comes into a session and they're emotionally distraught and upset and hurting, and they come before another human being, which is important. We're mammals, and so that connection with each other is so important. And with that connection and dialogue, that back and forth that happens in therapy, all of that emotion is brought out. But when the person brings it out, they have to organize it in rational format. One of the characteristics of schizophrenia is called word salad. And that's where they just start putting words like in a tossed salad. It's a mess. And nobody can decipher and understand what is going on. It's like trying to decipher the Da Vinci Code. And so therapy, when you come and you share and you feel the feelings and cry the tears and do all that stuff and organize, I call it ordering your experience. When you order your experience, your brain reshuffles the information. And people have said this many times. I come to therapy, and you didn't say a whole lot, but I feel better. It's because of this kind of intense emotions, right hemisphere, rationality, left hemisphere, coming together, and the whole brain working together. And they're like, whew, I feel lighter, I feel better. And so we're going to talk about lots of things that are just things we simply need to have in our lives because they work and they obey nature and the universe, So, needless to say, I am so excited, but if there's one takeaway message for today, tell your story. You can write it, you can put it in a song. It's important to work with the story that we've been given. You have a great day. Take care.